Some men carry their power in their fists, even when the world takes everything else away. A convicted man walks into a prison cafeteria on his first night. 200 inmates are watching. The block's king, a 320-pound murderer who has ruled this place for 11 years, walks to his table. He picks up the man's food tray and dumps it over his head. The entire room laughs. Guards look the other way. The big man leans down, puts his face inches away, and whispers, "What are you going to do about it, little man?" The convicted man doesn't wipe the food from his face. He doesn't stand up. He just looks up with dead, empty eyes. That man is Mike Tyson. 30 seconds later, the king is unconscious on the concrete floor. But what really happened in those 30 seconds? If this hooks you, like, subscribe and stay right here. Now let me take you back. Not far back. Just far enough so you understand what walked into that prison. It was March 26, 1992. Indianapolis, Indiana. Mike Tyson stood inside a courtroom wearing a suit that didn't fit right. The tie was too tight. His lawyer was still talking, but Tyson already knew. He could see it in the judge's face. Guilty. 6 years. The courtroom gasped. Tyson didn't. He just stared straight ahead like a man watching a door close in slow motion. Now here's the thing. This wasn't some washed-up fighter at the end of his road. This was Mike Tyson at 25 years old. A man who had held the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. A man who had knocked out 33 opponents. A man who once ended a fight in 91 seconds. And now he was being led out of that courtroom in handcuffs. They drove him to the Indiana Youth Center. Believe me, the name made it sound soft. It wasn't. This was a medium-security facility packed with over 2,000 inmates. Armed robbers, drug dealers, murderers, men who had nothing left to lose and all the time in the world to prove it. The van pulled up to the back entrance. 2 corrections officers walked Tyson through a steel door. The processing room was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. They told him to strip. He did. They handed him a khaki jumpsuit, 2 sizes too big. White sneakers with no laces. And then a guard snapped a plastic bracelet around his left wrist. Inmate number 922335. That was it. No more Iron Mike. No more the baddest man on the planet. Just a number on a plastic band. They walked him down a long corridor toward D Block. And this is where it started. Every cell they passed, a face appeared at the window. Some pressed against the glass. Some just stared. Nobody said a word. But Tyson could feel it. Every single man on that block already knew he was coming. See, in prison, news travels faster than anywhere on earth. By the time Tyson reached his cell, every inmate in that facility knew 3 things. 1, the heavyweight champion just arrived. 2, he was assigned to D Block. And 3, D Block belonged to a man named Mountain. Now Mountain. His real name was Gerald Haywood. Convicted of second-degree murder in 1981. He had been inside for 11 years. He stood 6'5", weighed 320 pounds. And he ran D Block the way a king runs a country. Every meal, every bunk assignment, every phone call. Nothing happened without Mountain's permission. The guards didn't stop him. Some of them were afraid of him. Others had arrangements. Either way, Mountain owned that block. Tyson's cell door shut behind him. 8 by 10 feet. A metal bed. A thin mattress. A steel toilet with no seat. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the bracelet on his wrist. Inmate 922,335. That first night, he could hear them talking through the walls. Whispers moving from cell to cell like a current. Tyson's here. D Block. Mountain's gonna test him. First meal. Watch. Tyson lay on that thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't afraid. That's not what this was. He was thinking. Because Mike Tyson understood something about violence that most people never will. It doesn't start with a punch. It starts with a decision. And by morning, he would have to make one. The cafeteria opened at 6 a.m. And Mountain would be waiting. 6 a.m. came fast. The buzzer went off. Cell doors rolled open one row at a time. Tyson swung his legs off the bed, laced up his white sneakers, and walked out with the rest of D-Block. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody walked next to him. It was like there was an invisible circle around the man. Inmates gave him space, not out of respect, out of curiosity. They wanted to see what was about to happen. The cafeteria was a wide, low-ceiling room. Metal tables bolted to the floor. Metal benches bolted to the tables. A serving line along the left wall. 2 guards standing near the exit. That was it. 2 guards for 200 men. Remember that. Tyson picked up a tray. Powdered eggs. A biscuit. Carton of milk. He walked to an empty table near the back wall and sat down alone. He didn't look around. He didn't scan the room. He just started eating. Calm. Quiet. Like a man having breakfast at a diner on a Tuesday morning. Now get this. Every single person in that room was watching him. Everyone. Some pretended they weren't. They'd glance over between bites, then look away. But most of them just stared openly, because they all knew what was coming. Mountain was sitting at his usual table near the center of the room. For men around him, his crew, guys who did whatever Mountain told them to do because the alternative was a visit to the infirmary. Mountain was eating slow, taking his time. He hadn't looked at Tyson yet. Not once. And that was the point. He was making Tyson wait. Making the whole room wait. Because Mountain understood theater. He'd been doing this for 11 years. Then he stopped eating. He put his fork down. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. And he stood up. The room changed. Believe me, you could feel it. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze in mid-air. 200 men went silent at the exact same time. The only sound was Mountain's boots on the concrete floor. Step, step, step. Walking toward Tyson's table. Tyson kept eating. Mountain reached the table. He stood there for a moment, just towering. 320 pounds of a man who had killed before, and everybody in that room knew it. Then he reached down, picked up Tyson's tray, and dumped every bit of food onto Tyson's head. Eggs, milk. The biscuit broke apart and crumbled down his face. The cafeteria erupted. Laughter. Loud, hard, cruel laughter. 200 men. Mountain laughed the loudest. A deep, booming sound that bounced off every wall. He leaned down, put his face right next to Tyson's ear, and said, "Welcome home, champ. In here, your belt means nothing. I run this house." More laughter. The guards near the exit didn't move. They watched. That's all. Mountain wasn't done. He put one massive hand on the table and leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "What are you gonna do about it, little man?" He didn't even address what happened. Instead, he looked at the principal and said, "My daughter has been at this school for 4 years with a clean record. Whatever this girl is claiming, I'd like to see proof." Proof. That word hung in the air for about 3 seconds. And that's when everything changed. Seagal moved for the first time. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He placed it face up in the center of the table. The screen was already loaded, already queued. He didn't say a word. He just pressed play. The video started. And the room died. You could hear every sound. The girls laughing. The words they used. The moment they grabbed her hair. And then, the knee. The crack of cartilage. The gasp. The blood. The camera shaking because the girl filming was laughing so hard she couldn't hold still. And then the caption, read aloud by the phone's accessibility feature. "Nobody's coming to save you." The video lasted 41 seconds. Felt like 41 minutes. When it ended, no one moved. The mother who called it a misunderstanding had her hand over her mouth. The father who said his daughter had a clean record was staring at the table. The one who said the girl tripped? His face had gone completely white. Seagal let the silence sit. He let it do its work. Then he stood up. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just stood. And the room felt smaller. He looked at the first father. Then the second. Then the third. One by one. Eye to eye. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low. Steady. The kind of voice that doesn't need volume because every word already carries weight. Your daughters need my child in the face. They filmed it. They posted it online. And they laughed while they did it. He paused. Let that land. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. One. Because if I handle it my way, and I promise you I know many ways, you won't need a lawyer. You'll need a surgeon. Now, before you think this is where fists start flying, let me stop you. Because that's not what happened. And that's not who Seagal was trying to be. Not anymore. He said what he said. And then he sat back down, folded his hands, and waited. The room moved fast after that. The principal, who had been useless for 20 minutes, suddenly found his spine. Suspension was mentioned. Then expulsion. The parents tried to push back. But the video was already on that table. Already burned into everyone's memory. There was no arguing with 41 seconds of evidence. Within 48 hours, all 3 girls were expelled. All 3 families issued written apologies. Public ones. Not the quiet, behind closed doors kind. The kind that go on record. The school revised its entire anti-bullying policy. And Seagal's daughter received a formal letter of apology from the school board itself. And here's where most people think the story ends. Believe me, I thought so too. Because what came next looked like peace. Seagal enrolled his daughter in Aikido at his personal dojo. Not a commercial gym. His space. His mats. His rules. Every morning at 5:15, before the sun was fully up, father and daughter trained together. He didn't yell. He didn't push her past her limits. He moved slowly, showed her how to breathe, how to stand, how to fall without breaking. Weeks passed. Her nose healed. The bruises faded. She started sleeping through the night again. She smiled more, talked more, even went back to school with her shoulders a little straighter than before. The video disappeared from the internet. The 3 girls were gone. The parents were silent. The neighborhood moved on. And if you looked at that family from the outside, you'd think the worst was behind them. You'd think Seagal fixed it. You'd think justice was served and the chapter was closed. And for a while, for a quiet, peaceful while, it really did feel like it was over. 6 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Seagal's daughter walked out of a grocery store carrying 2 bags. She was alone. The parking lot was half empty, and standing next to a silver car about 30 feet away were 3 girls. One of them she recognized immediately. It was her, the one who threw the knee. Now here's the thing. That girl had been expelled, humiliated publicly. Her family had been forced to apologize in writing. Her name had been in the local press. And in her mind, every single bit of that suffering was caused by one person. Not herself. Not her own cruelty. No, she blamed Seagal's daughter. The girl who didn't fight back. The girl whose father showed up and ruined her life. 6 months of anger had been building inside her. And today, in this parking lot, she saw her chance. The 2 new girls with her weren't from the old school. They were friends from the neighborhood. Bigger, louder, already laughing before anything even started. And one of them had her phone out, already recording. That detail matters. Remember it. The bully called out first. Something sharp. Something about how her daddy wasn't here to protect her now. Seagal's daughter kept walking. Didn't look up. Didn't respond. Just kept moving toward the crosswalk with her grocery bags. But the girl followed. And the other 2 fanned out, blocking the path. Now stop for a second. Think about what's happening here. This isn't the same situation as the alley. This is worse. Because this time there are cameras rolling from the start. This time, if Seagal's daughter fights back, she becomes the story. She becomes the aggressor. The daughter of a famous action star beating up a teenage girl in a parking lot. The headlines write themselves. The lawsuits write themselves. Everything Seagal tried to protect her from. The spotlight, the media, the public destruction of her privacy. All of it comes crashing down the second she throws a single punch. And she knew it. Believe me, she knew exactly what was at stake. The bully stepped closer, got in her face, said things I won't repeat here because they don't deserve to be remembered. The two friends circled behind. One of them shoved her from the back. The grocery bags hit the ground. A carton of eggs cracked open on the pavement. Seagal's daughter straightened up. She didn't step back. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for her phone. She stood exactly the way her father taught her. Feet shoulder-width apart. Weight centered. Hands open at her sides. Breathing through her nose. And in that moment, something else was happening. Something none of those girls could see. Because while they were circling and laughing and recording, her mind went somewhere else. Back to the dojo. Back to 5:15 in the morning. Back to her father's hands correcting her posture for the 100th time. She remembered the first week. How she couldn't even fall correctly. How every throw left bruises on her hips and shoulders. How she wanted to quit after the third day. She told her father she wasn't built for this. He didn't argue. He just said, "Show up tomorrow." So she did. And the day after that. And the one after that. By the second month, she stopped flinching. By the third, she started reading movement. Not just reacting to it. Seeing it before it happened. Her father would throw a technique and she'd already be shifting her weight before his hand reached her. That's when he smiled for the first time on the mat. Not a big smile. Just a nod and a slight curve at the corner of his mouth. And she knew. She was getting it. Some started screaming after 3. Tyson didn't scream. He didn't pace. He didn't bang on the door. He trained. Every morning, same time, he started. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats, shadowboxing, hundreds of reps. Thousands over those 2 weeks. The guards who slid his food trays through the slot could hear him in there. The steady rhythm of his breathing. The soft thud of his fists cutting air. One of them later told a reporter, years after the fact, that it was the most unsettling sound he'd ever heard in that facility. Not the screaming. Not the fights. The sound of a man training alone in a concrete box like he was getting ready for something. And he was. Now, while Tyson was in the hole, something happened upstairs that Mountain didn't plan for. The warden, Trigg, started asking questions. See, Trigg hadn't ordered that solitary transfer. He knew it. And when a warden finds out that an inmate was moved without his authorization, that's not just a problem. That's a threat to his control. Trigg pulled the transfer paperwork. The name on it was Officer Dale Perkins. Trigg pulled Perkins into his office, closed the door, and 20 minutes later, Perkins walked out without his badge. Fired. Just like that. 11 years of Mountain's most valuable asset inside those walls. Gone in 20 minutes. But Trigg didn't stop there. He ordered a full review of D-block operations. Guard rotations. Commissary records. Incident reports. And the more he dug, the more he found. Mountain's fingerprints were on everything. Contraband routes. Smuggled goods. Protection payments flowing through commissary accounts. It was all there, hidden in plain sight because nobody had ever bothered to look. Nobody had ever had a reason to. Until Tyson. On day 15, Tyson's cell door opened. A guard he hadn't seen before stood in the hallway. "You're out." Warden's orders. This time, it really was the warden's orders. Tyson walked back up those stairs, through the chapel corridor, past the common area and onto D-block. And the block was different. He could feel it the second he stepped through the gate. Something had shifted. The air was different. The way men stood in the corridor was different. Nobody looked away from him now. They looked right at him. And there was something new in their eyes. Not fear. Something deeper. Recognition. Because while Tyson was in the hole, the entire block had watched Mountain's empire crack apart. Perkins was gone. 2 other guards connected to Mountain had been reassigned. Mountain's crew had scattered. Men who had followed Mountain for years suddenly had nowhere to stand. And Mountain himself was still in the infirmary, jaw still wired shut, writing notes to men who were no longer listening. Tyson walked into the cafeteria that evening. Same room. Same fluorescent lights. Same metal tables bolted to the floor. He picked up a tray. Powdered eggs again. A biscuit. Carton of milk. He walked to the same table near the back wall and sat down. Nobody touched his food. Nobody walked toward his table. Nobody laughed. He ate in silence. And when he was done, he stood up, returned his tray, and walked out. No drama. No victory lap. No speech. Just a man eating his dinner and leaving. But here's what happened next that most people never heard about. That same night, an inmate came to Tyson's cell. The thin man, mid-40s, serving 12 years for armed robbery. His name was Curtis. He stood in the doorway and didn't come in. He just held something out in his hand. It was the photograph. Tyson's mother's photograph. Creased now, a little bent at the corner, but intact. Curtis said, "Mountain's boys had it. They were gonna burn it. I took it before they could." Tyson looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he looked at Curtis. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded once. Slow. And Curtis understood. That nod meant more than words. It meant Tyson saw him. In a place where most men were invisible, Tyson saw him. Curtis walked away. Tyson sat on his bed and held the photograph in both hands. His mother, Lorna Mae Tyson, dead since he was 16. The only picture he had left of her. He pressed it flat against his knee to smooth out the crease. Then he tucked it inside his pillowcase where he could feel it against his head when he slept. And that night, for the first time in the Indiana Youth Center, Mike Tyson closed his eyes and slept through until morning. No whispers through the walls. No waiting for what comes next. Just sleep. The kind of sleep a man gets when the war is over and he knows it. Now, what happened after that night is the part of this story most people never hear. Because the world only remembers the punch. The cafeteria. Mountain on the floor. That's the headline. That's the clip. But what came next? That's the real story. Mountain's jaw took 8 weeks to heal. When the wires finally came off and he could talk again, the first thing he discovered was that he had nothing left to say. His crew was gone. Perkins was gone. The guards who used to look the other way had been rotated to other blocks. The commissary accounts that funneled his payments had been frozen and audited. 11 years of building a kingdom inside those walls, and it was all taken apart in less than a month. Not by Tyson's fists, by a warden who finally had a reason to open the books. Mountain was transferred to a maximum security facility downstate 3 months later. Believe me, that transfer wasn't a promotion. It was an exile. He went from running D-Block like a king to being a nobody in a facility where nobody knew his name and nobody cared. He served out the rest of his sentence in silence. No crew, no power, no one writing him notes or following his orders. Just a big man in a small cell getting older. And Tyson, well, Tyson stayed at the Indiana Youth Center for 3 more years. And this is where the story takes a turn that nobody expected. Not the press, not the public, not even Tyson himself. He started reading. Now, I know that sounds small. A man picks up a book. So what? But you have to understand the context. Mike Tyson had been fighting since he was 13 years old. He'd been trained by Cus D'Amato, the legendary boxing trainer who took a street kid from Brownsville and turned him into the youngest heavyweight champion in history. 20 years old when he won that belt. Think about that. 20 years old and the most dangerous man alive. Everything in Tyson's life had been about power, speed, destruction, the ability to end a man in seconds. That was his identity. That was all he knew. And when you strip a man of everything except the one thing he's always been, most of the time he just becomes more of that one thing. Harder, angrier, more violent. That's what the prison expected. That's what the world expected. But in that prison, with no ring, no trainers, no cameras, and no one to fight, something shifted. A corrections counselor named Iris Martinez noticed Tyson sitting alone in the yard one afternoon. Doing nothing. Just sitting. She brought him a book the next day. A biography of Alexander the Great. She didn't say much. Just set it on the table and said, "You might find this interesting." Tyson read it in 2 days. Then he asked for another. And another. Iris kept bringing them. Histories. Biographies. Philosophy. Tolstoy. Voltaire. Machiavelli. Alexander Dumas. Men who had conquered empires. lost everything, and still found a way to make their mark. Tyson consumed these books the way he used to consume opponents. Fast, completely, with a hunger that surprised everyone around him. Now get this. The man who the world called an animal. The man the media described as a savage. That man was sitting in a prison cell reading Nietzsche. Reading about the philosophy of power and will. And understanding it. Not just the words. The ideas behind the words. The way power works. The way it shifts. The way it can be built, lost, and rebuilt in forms that don't require a single punch. He started talking differently. Inmates noticed it first. The man who used to communicate in nods and single words began having conversations. Real ones. About history. About purpose. About what it means to be strong when strength alone isn't enough. Curtis, the thin man who had returned the photograph, became something close to a friend. They'd walk the yard together. Tyson talking. Curtis listening. Two men doing time, finding a way to make the hours mean something. The guards noticed it too. Tyson wasn't a problem. He wasn't starting fights. He wasn't running a crew. He wasn't building a system like Mountain had. He was just present, quiet, reading, training alone in the mornings, walking the yard in the afternoons, eating his meals at his table in the back of the cafeteria. Always that same table, and always alone. Not because no one wanted to sit with him, because that's what he needed. Iris Martinez later said in an interview that she watched Tyson transform over those 3 years in a way she had never seen in 20 years of corrections work. She said most men come into prison and get harder, meaner, smaller inside. Tyson came in hard and somehow got softer. Not weak, never weak, but open, like a fist that slowly unclenches and becomes a hand. There's a detail I want you to hear. About 6 months before his release, Tyson did something that never made the news. Mountain's transfer had gone through long before, but Mountain had left behind a mess. Men on D Block who had been under his control for years were lost without the structure. Some of them were young, early 20s, men who had followed Mountain because they didn't know how else to survive in that place. Tyson noticed one of them, a 22-year-old kid serving 5 years for aggravated assault. The kid was spiraling, getting into fights every week, racking up infractions, headed straight for solitary or worse. He reminded Tyson of someone, maybe himself at that age, maybe one of the boys from Brownsville who never got a cuz d'amato, who never got a chance to turn the violence into something that paid. The kid was angry the way Tyson had been angry at 13, blind with it, burning with it, no direction, no one watching. Tyson pulled him aside one afternoon in the yard. Nobody heard what he said. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. Nobody knows the exact words. But after that day, the kid stopped fighting. He signed up for the GED program. He started showing up to the library. He started sitting in the back row of the chapel on Sundays. Not praying. Just sitting. Quiet. Like he was practicing being still. Whatever Tyson said to him in those 10 minutes, it worked. And that, right there, that's the part of the story that matters more than the punch. More than Mountain on the floor. More than the 3-hit combination that had to be slowed to quarter speed on camera. Because any man can throw a punch. Mike Tyson was learning how to do something harder. He was learning how to put his hands down. March 25, 1995, 3 years after he walked in. Tyson was released from the Indiana Youth Center. He walked out the front gate at 6 in the morning. The sun was barely up. The air was cold and sharp, and it hit his face like something he'd forgotten existed. Fresh air. Open sky. No concrete ceiling. No fluorescent hum. Car was waiting. Don King, the promoter, was inside. Already on the phone. Already planning. The press was already gathered across the street. Cameras flashing. Reporters shouting questions. The circus was starting again before Tyson had even taken 10 steps as a free man. Tyson stopped on the sidewalk. He turned around and looked at the building behind him. The concrete walls. The wire fencing. The small windows of D Block, 3 stories up. He stood there for a long moment. The cameras kept flashing. King honked the horn. Tyson didn't move. He was looking at one window in particular. Third floor, fourth from the left. His old cell. And in that window, barely visible, a hand pressed flat against the glass. Curtis. Watching him leave. Tyson raised one hand. Not a wave. Just a hand, held up for a moment. A goodbye that nobody else in that parking lot understood. Then he turned around, got in the car, and drove away. The world was waiting for him. The comeback fight, the money, the spectacle, all of it was already planned. And Mike Tyson stepped back into that world because that was the road in front of him, and he had never been a man who backed away from the road in front of him. But he carried something with him when he left that prison. Something he didn't have when he walked in. Not toughness. He had always been tough. Not strength. He had always been strong. What he carried out was something quieter. The understanding that the most powerful thing a dangerous man can do is choose not to be dangerous. That real control isn't about what you can do to another person. It's about what you don't do. Even when you could. Even when they deserve it. Even when every part of you is screaming to let go. He still had the photograph in his pocket. Creased. A little bent at the corner. His mother's face looking up at him from a small square of paper. He had walked into that prison as the most feared man in the world. He walked out as something the world didn't have a name for yet. Some men carry their power in their fists, even when the world takes everything else away. But the rare ones, the ones who survive the fire and come out different, they learn to carry it somewhere else. Tyson learned that in a concrete box with a light that never turned off. And he never forgot it.